Hello, I'm Mimi, and over the past few months, I've been living, working, and illustrating my way around Europe, living out my dream of being a digital nomad. But can I actually afford this lifestyle on my business income alone? I want to show you a breakdown of my expenses versus my income because my ultimate goal is to try and make this lifestyle of work and travel financially sustainable for me long term. If you're new here, I've been building my own art and content business for the past 3 years, and I have 3 main income sources. I work as a picture book illustrator, I run this channel which now has over 100 videos and a lovely YouTube community, and I create monthly content for my amazing patrons over on Patreon. It took me 3 years to get to the point where I felt financially stable enough with my income as an artist and content creator to take the leap, sell most of my things, pack a backpack, and get on a plane from Australia to Europe. For a quick overview, I started out in Italy in early March going to the Bologna Children's Book Fair, which I have a whole video about if you want to watch it after this one. Then I headed up north to the mountains for a few days, and then spent a week in Rome. I flew to the UK at the end of March, and then met up with my partner Dan, who had been hiking in New Zealand while I was in Italy. In April, we spent some time in the English countryside to get some work done and go on some lovely walks. And then in May, we spent most of the month working on the business and spending time with family. So how much does all that cost? And does my income as an artist and content creator cover it all? Let's take a look 1 month at a time at how much I spent and how much I earned. And because I'm Australian, all of these figures will be in Australian dollars. So in March, I spent a lot of the month traveling in Italy, and I spent 3,843 Australian dollars on accommodation, which is a lot. And it was this high because I was traveling on my own, but staying in private accommodation. I used to mostly stay in hostels, but on this trip, I wanted a quiet space where I could work on my computer, so I stayed in Airbnbs and a hotel, and for all of March, I was traveling solo, so I was paying the full accommodation cost. It was really worthwhile for me though to be able to stay in places like Bologna and Rome. It meant that I could still draw and maintain my business, and it definitely helped me feel secure and safe while I traveled. On food in March, I spent $558, which I'm actually pretty happy with. Because I was spending a bit more on accommodation, they usually came with some basic breakfast included and a space for me to cook my own food, so I could keep that cost quite reasonable. And for transport in March, I spent $406 for trains and buses and a short flight, but I also had to fly from Australia over to Italy, which cost $1,324. Technically, I paid for that last year, but it seems like an important expense to include, so let's add it in and call it $1,730 on transport for the month. I also have some ongoing costs of running my business, which works out to be about $149 per month, and that includes things like software subscriptions, website costs, and digital storage. I have other one-off costs during the year, like hardware purchases and accounting fees, but these are just the recurring costs for my business. I have quite low overheads for my business because I don't have a set office space that I rent, I don't have stock, it's all digital. I do pay my partner, who's my video editor and helps run this channel, but I won't include his rate in my expenses because it's not for me to disclose how much he makes. I've just removed that amount from my income total, so it's already been accounted for. So if you include the flight over to Europe and all of my travel and business expenses for March, it cost me $5,920 to start my digital nomad journey. For the sake of simplicity and relevance, I haven't included some other miscellaneous expenses that aren't part of the ongoing lifestyle, like gifts I bought for birthdays and that sort of thing. But because I'm backpacking, I don't buy many things in general anyway. So the big question is, how much did I earn in March? Well, I earned 9,561 Australian dollars before tax because even though I didn't work as much as I normally do, my income isn't tied directly to how many hours that I work. If for simplicity's sake we assume that I'll pay about 25% of that in tax, then a more accurate figure that I actually take home is around $7,170. I had a picture book advance payment fall in March, plus I had income from YouTube, Patreon, and my online shops. I have to work a minimum of 2 full-time weeks of the month to meet my video and content requirements, though it's usually closer to 3, and if I have a professional project on, like a picture book, then that easily fills the rest of the month. If I want to take a couple of weeks off like I did in Italy though, I can do that if I do those hours ahead of time and make sure that my main videos are already done before I have time off. And I can also just focus on making simpler content for that month that doesn't take me as long. I still worked for about 2 full-time weeks in March, I just had a pocket of time off in the middle of the month. So overall, I could afford to have what to me felt like quite an extravagant month in March. I still came out with $1,250 after all of my expenses, and I had such a valuable time going to the Bologna Children's Book Fair and collecting lots of inspiration from around Italy. In April, I was in England and my boyfriend came over to the UK to start traveling with me after he had spent a month hiking in New Zealand, so now we could start splitting accommodation expenses. I spent $1,350 on accommodation, which is a lot more reasonable than March. I did spend about a week and a half staying with family members and catching up with them though, which helped reduce costs as well. I spent $636 on food for the month, including groceries, eating out and drinks, because now that I was reunited with Dan, we were eating out a little bit more than I had been when I was mostly on my own in March. Transport in April cost me $170 for some trains and buses around England as we moved between a few places, and my recurring business expenses were $149 again to run my website and pay for software subscriptions. This figure doesn't include fees that I pay for my online shops because that's already taken out before I ever see the money. Maybe if you guys are interested in seeing that though, I can make a separate video about it. So in total in April, I spent $2,305, and that's with a mix of paid accommodation and staying with some family, and also now sharing costs with my partner, which makes some things quite a bit cheaper, but the numbers that I included are all my share of any costs. I earned in April $4,702, which if like last month we assume I'll pay around 25% of that in tax, then that brings us to a more realistic figure of $3,526 Australian dollars. I did a lot more work in April, but I earned less because I didn't have a picture book advance payment like I did the month before, and because I was a little less active online in March, I didn't have quite as much traffic to my YouTube channel and other content channels. It was still a nice average month though. I think the scary thing about running a business like mine is that the income is variable every month. So some months are high and some months are lower, and it's not like I have a set income each month. I made sure though that before I started traveling, that my monthly average income over about a 6-month period was enough to comfortably cover my expenses. So overall in April, I was still left with about $1,176 after all of my expenses, which is really similar to March, even though my expenses were so much lower. If you've been looking for some creative help, then I want to really quickly tell you about all of the tutorials and resources available on my Patreon. I've been making goodies over there for 2 full years now, and so I've created quite the collection of how-to articles, step-by-step drawing tutorials, digital art tips, lesson videos, and drawing process walkthroughs. My beautiful Bluebell tier gets access to all of the resources that I make, and I even have a page on my website that links to all of the tutorials so you can easily see everything at a glance or check out what's available before you decide whether you'd like to join. You can cancel anytime. I'd love to see you there, so I'll leave the link in the description below. Now let's jump back into the video. So in May, we didn't explore too much and stayed in one Airbnb for most of the month so that we could focus on some art projects and new products that I wanted to make and just have a more settled month. I spent $1,791 on accommodation because we stayed in private Airbnbs for the full month. We were mostly just in Peterborough in a little apartment granny flat because I wanted to be close to some family members for a little while. And then we moved on to a really cute cottage in the countryside, which I loved. I think it's quite important for me to balance periods of travel and lots of exploring like I did in March with periods of being settled for several weeks because moving around a lot requires energy, and so does running and growing my business. So trying to do lots of both at the same time would just be too much for me. Being stationary allows me to focus on my art and business more, so I can work on extra projects like releasing my second brush pack and creativity workbook last month. In May, I spent $594 on food, so a similar amount to the previous 2 months, and that includes groceries, drinks, and eating out. I only spent $28 on transport because we were mostly in one place, so that was a nice cheap month for my transport expenses, and again my business cost $149 to run for the month. In total, that brings my expenses for May to $2,562 Australian dollars, so pretty close actually to the previous month, and maybe a good indicator of what my general expenses will be most months when we're staying in private accommodation. My income increased in May though to $8,366, which if we pull out about 25% for tax again, comes to $6,274. It was higher partly because I released some new products in my Etsy store, partly because my YouTube and Patreon had a good month, and also because I had another advance payment. I worked a lot in May, probably more than regular full-time hours, because I wanted to make the most of being stationary and also get ahead a little bit because we're planning to take a bit of time off in June for some hiking. After all my expenses, I was left with about $3,712, which is a really comfortable amount that I'll put somewhere safe to save for my future dreams. So overall, my first 3 months of being a digital nomad, including an international flight, traveling around Italy, private accommodation pretty much the whole time, and a mix of home-cooked meals and eating out, I spent a total of $10,787 Australian dollars. I earned an approximate after-tax income of $16,970 for those 3 months, so at this rate, I can definitely afford to live a digital nomad lifestyle. For some of you, it'll seem like a lot of money, and for some of you, it won't seem like a lot. For me personally, it's quite a lot of money, especially compared to my recent spending and earnings over the past couple of years. I spent about 63% of my income, so the rest I can put aside for the future, maybe even to save for my own dream cottage in the countryside one day. I'd like to spend a bit less than I did these past 3 months on average going forward, but obviously I won't be buying a long haul flight every month, and I think we'll do some camping and house sitting later in the year, which will save a bit of money as well. The money that I earn from my art and my business is so precious to me, and I want to be really intentional with it. And so far, it's been really exciting and valuable and inspiring to be able to explore as a digital nomad. It's always been a dream of mine to be able to travel while I work, and I'm excited to continue growing this business and beautiful community from all sorts of different places. By watching this video, you're directly supporting my digital nomad journey, so thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this video, then give it a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!